There's a mountain pass in the Himalayas where the air is so thin that your brain starts shutting down, where blizzards appear out of nowhere and kill dozens at a time, and where bodies from decades ago still lie frozen in the snow, serving as grim warnings to those who dare to cross. This isn't Everest, this isn't K2. This is Thorong La Pass, the highest point on the Annapurna Circuit. And what makes it truly terrifying is that thousands of regular tourists attempt to cross it every year, most of them completely unprepared for what awaits them at 17,769 feet. Stay with me, because the stories coming out of this pass reveal just how quickly the mountains can turn from breathtaking beauty into a frozen nightmare, and why experienced guides say, the pass chooses who lives and who dies. Picture this. You've been trekking for 10 days through some of the most beautiful landscapes on Earth. Terraced rice fields give way to pine forests, then rhododendron blooms, then barren, high-altitude desert. You've acclimatized slowly, your body adjusting to the thinning air. The local villages have been welcoming, the food has been good, and you're feeling confident. Then you reach Thorong La Pass, the last settlement before the pass, and everything changes. The temperature drops, the wind picks up, and tomorrow, you have to cross. Thorong La Pass sits at 5,416 meters above sea level, higher than any peak in the Alps, higher than Mount Whitney in California, higher than anywhere most people will ever go in their lives. At this altitude, the air contains about half the oxygen available at sea level. Your body is operating in survival mode. Every step requires conscious effort. Your heart pounds, your head throbs, and if you're not careful, you die. The Annapurna Circuit is considered one of the world's greatest treks, a 200-kilometer loop around the Annapurna Massif in Nepal that takes you through an incredible diversity of landscapes and cultures. But Thorong La Pass is the crux, the make-or-break section that separates those who complete the circuit from those who have to turn back. And here's what most people don't realize when they book their trek. This pass has killed more people than most of the famous 8,000er peaks. We're not talking about professional mountaineers here. We're talking about backpackers, gap year students, retirees ticking items off bucket lists. People who thought they were just going on a challenging hike and ended up fighting for their lives in a blizzard at 17,000 feet. Here's where this gets really disturbing. The weather at Thorong La can change in minutes. You can start the crossing under clear skies and find yourself in a complete whiteout an hour later, with visibility down to a few meters, and temperatures dropping to -20 Celsius or lower. The wind can reach speeds that literally knock people off their feet, and because the pass is essentially a saddle between two peaks, that wind gets funneled and amplified in conditions that are far worse than anywhere else on Earth. In October 2014, one of the deadliest incidents in the history occurred. A massive blizzard, the remnants of Cyclone Hudhud, hit the Annapurna region with almost no warning. More than 230 trekkers and guides were trapped on or near Thorong La Pass. 43 people died, some froze to death. Others fell from cliffs couldn't see in the whiteout. Rescue helicopters couldn't fly in the conditions, and those who survived did so by finding emergency shelters or digging snow caves and waiting out the storm. Survivors described watching people collapse and die around them, unable to help because they were barely surviving themselves. But here's what makes Thorong La particularly insidious. It doesn't just kill through obvious dangers like avalanches or falls. It kills through exhaustion and poor decision-making caused by altitude. At over 5,000 meters, your brain isn't functioning normally. You're hypoxic, literally oxygen-starved. This affects judgment, coordination, and your ability to recognize danger. People make decisions at high altitude they would never make at sea level, continuing in deteriorating weather, ignoring symptoms of altitude sickness, separating from their group. The standard crossing routine starts at 3 or 4 in the morning. You wake up in the freezing darkness at Thorong La Pass or a slightly higher high camp, force down some breakfast, and start walking, hoping to reach the pass and get down the other side before afternoon weather rolls in. Ascent takes 4 to 6 hours for most people. Every step a battle against gravity, altitude, and exhaustion. You're walking through snow and ice, sometimes in pitch darkness with only a headlamp, part of a long line of trekkers all pushing toward the same goal. Here's a detail that captures the surreal nature of this crossing. At the top of Thorong La, there's a sign marking the elevation and prayer flags flapping in the brutal wind. Most people who make it take photos there, smiling despite being unable to breathe properly, celebrating their achievement. What you don't see in those photos is that just meters away, there might be someone suffering from severe altitude sickness, vomiting, unable to stand. The contrast between triumph and tragedy can be measured in footsteps. Now here's something that will shock you. The Annapurna Circuit has gotten significantly more dangerous in recent years, not less. Why? Because a road was built along much of the route. This road allows people to skip the lower sections of the trek, the sections that used to provide gradual acclimatization. Now, trekkers can take a jeep to high altitude, start their trek from there, and reach Thorong La in just a few days. Their bodies haven't had time to adjust. They're practically guaranteeing themselves severe altitude sickness. Local guides are deeply frustrated by this. They've watched the death rate increase as tourists rush the trek, ignoring advice about acclimatization, putting themselves too hard, too fast. The Nepali government has tried to implement safety measures, including firing guns for certain sections, but enforcement is spotty, and many trekkers still go it alone, relying on trail markers and GPS rather than local knowledge. There's also the issue of climate change, which is transforming the Himalayas in real time. Glaciers are retreating, weather patterns are becoming more unpredictable. Traditional crossings, which used heavily reliable weather windows in October and April, is now much more volatile. Guides who've worked the circuit for decades say they can no longer predict conditions with the confidence they once had. The mountains are changing, becoming more dangerous, and the old rules no longer fully apply. But despite all the danger, despite the deaths, despite the objective risks, people keep coming. Why? Part of it is the challenge, the desire to test yourself against one of the world's great treks. Part of it is the beauty, because the Annapurna Circuit really is spectacularly gorgeous. Part is the allure of the forbidden, the same impulse that draws people to dangerous places throughout history. We want to know if we can do it, if we're strong enough, brave enough, lucky enough. The descent from Thorong La into the Kali Gandaki Valley is almost as dangerous as the ascent. You drop over 1,600 meters in a single day, walking on steep, loose trails with knees already destroyed from the climb up. People fall, ankles twist, exhaustion leads to mistakes, and you're still at extreme altitude for much of the descent, so the risk of altitude sickness doesn't disappear just because you crossed the highest point. There are memorials along the trail, simple stone cairns or plaques mark spots where trekkers died. Some are recent. Some are decades old. Each one represents a story, a person who came to the Himalayas seeking adventure and never made it home. Local communities maintain these memorials, treating them with respect, understanding that the mountains they live beneath are both provider and destroyer. Here's something that adds another layer to this story. For local people, Sherpa and Gurung communities who live in the Annapurna region, Thorong La isn't some death-defying challenge. It's a route they've used for centuries to move between valleys, to trade goods, to visit family. They cross it with loads of supplies on their backs, sometimes in sandals, adapted to the altitude from birth. The contrast between their casual competence and struggle for every breath is stark and humbling. The economics of trekking in Nepal are complicated. Tourism brings desperately needed money to impoverished mountain communities. Tea houses, guide services, porter jobs, these provide income that wouldn't exist otherwise. But that same economic dependence creates pressure to get tourists across the pass even when conditions are marginal. To say yes when the answer should be no. To prioritize business over safety. It's a moral dilemma that plays out every crossing season. What strikes me most about Thorong La Pass is how it strips away all pretense. At that altitude, in those conditions, nothing matters except the next breath, the next step. Your job, your accomplishments, your social media followers, none of it means anything when you're fighting hypoxia and hypothermia at 17,000 feet. The pass is the great equalizer, treating the CEO and the gap year student exactly the same. It doesn't care who you are. It only cares whether you respect it. So when you see those triumphant summit photos from Thorong La Pass, remember what they don't show. The person just off camera who's being helped down because they can barely stand. The guide making the agonizing decision whether to turn a group back. The prayer flags that mark not just a scenic viewpoint, but a place where many have faced their mortality, and some have lost. The Annapurna Circuit is beautiful, transformative, and genuinely dangerous, and Thorong La Pass is where all of those qualities converge into something that will either be the greatest achievement of your life, or your last mistake. The mountains are calling, but make sure you understand what you're answering before you go.